New Mexico,
New Mexico,
Montreal,
Montreal,
and Occupy Wall Street.
and Occupy Wall Street.
So I want to talk a little bit
So I want to talk a little bit
about what I've seen
about what I've seen
in some of the other Occupy movements,
in some of the other Occupy movements,
what I've learned,
what I've learned,
and some of my fears,
and some of my fears,
and some of my concerns
and some of my concerns
about the next stage
about the next stage
of this movement.
of this movement.
The next stage of this movement
The next stage of this movement
is going to be
is going to be
how we deal with conflict,
how we deal with conflict,
internal conflict,
internal conflict,
and the repression
and the repression
that will certainly come
that will certainly come
when the people in these buildings
when the people in these buildings
and the police
and the police
become uptight.
become uptight.
So first of all,
So first of all,
this is not a protest.
this is not a protest.
One thing I've learned
One thing I've learned
in this process
in this process
is that this is not a protest. This is a movement.
this is a movement.
It's hard for the media
It's hard for the media
to articulate
to articulate
what this movement is
what this movement is
because we don't have demands.
because we don't have demands.
But this is not true.
But this is not true.
Movements don't operate with demands.
Movements don't operate with demands.
Movements operate with process.
Movements operate with process.
Instead of making demands
Instead of making demands
that will be negotiated
that will be negotiated
for years
for years
with elected politicians,
with elected politicians,
which we've already tried
which we've already tried
for years with elected politicians,
elected politicians,
we're trying to demonstrate our values
we're trying to demonstrate our values
and articulate
and articulate
something much bigger than demands.
something much bigger than demands.
We're failing
We're failing
in our culture
in our culture
from a lack of imagination.
from a lack of imagination.
And what we're achieving here
And what we're achieving here
is space
is space
for imagination.
for imagination.
This is not just a revolution,
This is not just a revolution.
it's a collective movement
It's a collective movement
to collectively pull
to collectively pull
a handbrake,
a handbrake,
an emergency brake.
an emergency brake.
This capitalist,
This capitalist,
growth-based economy
growth-based economy
can only survive
can only survive
with growth
with growth
at 3% a year.
at 3% a year.
That means in 24 years,
That means in 24 years,
the size of this economy
the size of this economy
will double.
will double.
Our waterways,
Our waterways,
our fish,
our fish,
our forests, our young people
our young people
can't tolerate that kind of growth.
can't tolerate that kind of growth.
So this is a crisis of growth.
So this is a crisis of growth.
And the shadow side of our economic system
And the shadow side of our economic system
is ecological degradation.
is ecological degradation.
And this is a movement
And this is a movement
because it's diverse.
because it's diverse.
In order to be diverse,
In order to be diverse,
we have to communicate
we have to communicate
with people outside
with people outside
and beyond
and beyond
what we know.
what we know.
We have to communicate with those we don't know.
We have to communicate with those we don't know.
We have to listen.
We have to listen.
This takes compassion
This takes compassion
and imagination.
and imagination.
Compassion is hard work,
Compassion is hard work,
but it's the work worth doing.
but it's the work worth doing.
Listening is hard work,
Listening is hard work,
but it's the work worth doing.
it's the work worth doing.
So this Occupy movement
So this Occupy movement
has to learn
has to learn
to listen to other views
to listen to other views
in order to cultivate
in order to cultivate
imagination again.
imagination again.
This movement is going to win
This movement is going to win
because it's not hierarchical.
because it's not hierarchical.
You can't meet hierarchy
You can't meet hierarchy
with hierarchy.
with hierarchy.
You have to meet hierarchy
You have to meet hierarchy
with creativity.
with creativity.
The enemy of creativity
The enemy of creativity
is anger.
is anger.
When you're angry,
When you're angry,
you're not creative
you're not creative
because you think you're right
because you think you're right
and you think they're wrong.
and you
The 1% do not deserve our hatred. They deserve our compassion. Our hatred will burn us out. So what we've achieved so far is a space where we're slowing down. It's too early to make demands. Instead, we have to stop and wait for our imagination collectively to come together, to articulate a way of living based on the values of interdependence, of compassion, of diversity, not anger. When you're angry, don't do anything, don't say anything, go for a walk, find your breath, practice yoga. If you're not into yoga, have a beer, find your breath, but don't do anything. Find out how you feel. And underneath what you feel is creativity. But don't put up the invisible, idealistic Gandhi shield, which when it's philosophical, gets nothing done. Anger's not bad. So you need to take the momentum of your anger. Because the momentum of anger get things done. But it only works if it's merged with creativity. So we need the momentum of anger because the next stage of this movement is going to be demonstrating how when we meet viewpoints opposed to our viewpoints, anger arises. And we need to show that we can meet that anger and opposing viewpoints with creativity. And that creativity is going to show our values. This isn't about making demands. It's creating a space for imagination, and we've accomplished that. Yesterday evening, I was here when a young woman died. This is tragic. But please don't turn her into a symbol. She's not a metaphor. Camping here is not a metaphor. It's not a philosophy. It's being human. What we need is to be human. We want the 1% to become human again. To become human again. To remain human. When the Buddha started assembling a community, he told them to wear robes. And go and find robes out of discarded material. If the material had been eaten by rats, if material had been thrown away, you should take that material and make robes out of it. Whether you like the Buddha or not, this is a wonderful practice. To take what's discarded and bring it into your heart. When there's diversity, we have to take parts of our community that we've discarded. Because there are people that we treat like garbage. There are parts of the ecosystem that we treat like garbage. There are parts of ourselves that we treat like garbage. And we have to take these pieces that we've compartmentalized and bring them into this space. That's how imagination happens. And that's how we'll win. It's not philosophical. It's not ideological. It's about showing and demonstrating simple living. Interdependence. Knowing how to take care of our anger. Not meeting anger with anger. Is this possible? We're showing it. The media don't know how to report on this. Because the media need demands and they need violence. And we won't give them demands or violence. We won't give them demands because we're articulating a much bigger dream. And we won't give them violence because we're taking care of our anger. Those of you who live here, those of you who support this, you're undertaking a major responsibility to become peacemakers. Not this absurd term of peacekeeper, but making peace internally and making peace externally. That's why this is a spiritual movement, creating a new kind of military, making peace, simultaneous peace, inward and outward. This is the future of the military, is to make peace in all directions. And that's what we're showing. We don't need to articulate that with lists and demands. We need to show it. Don't be afraid to talk about love. Don't be afraid to talk about kindness. When we lose something, when we lose someone we love, when we finish an exhale, when we lose a paradigm, we're always so quick to find a new lover, a new paradigm, and it never works. Well, one-night stands are kind of fun, but they don't last because we're too quick. And when we let go and pull the brakes, we have to let there be space. And out of that space, we can articulate and imagine and sow the seeds of a different way of living. So don't feel under pressure to figure out demands. We need to enter the space that's only achieved when we pull the handbrake. And we show in our bodies, and we show in this camp, that this movement is organized. It has structure. You can have structure without hierarchy. You can have structure and creativity without oppression, without sexism, without classism. And this is what we're showing. But it's painful. And what I worry about is you'll leave here and you'll forget that this movement transcends this park. Today, Occupy is in 1,980 cities.